Your phone buzzes with an incoming call, and instead of answering, you watch it ring while your heart rate spikes like you're being chased by a predator. Then you immediately text them back, asking what they needed, feeling both guilty and relieved. If you've ever wondered why a simple phone call feels more terrifying than a job interview, there's actually fascinating psychology behind why your brain treats that ringtone like a threat. Here's the thing that might surprise you. Your preference for texting isn't about being antisocial or lazy. It's actually your brain trying to manage what psychologists call cognitive load, the amount of mental effort being used. When you're on a phone call, your mind is juggling multiple complex processes simultaneously. You're decoding tone, managing real time responses, reading emotional subtext, and maintaining conversational flow, all while having zero time to process what you actually want to say. Think about the last time someone called you unexpectedly. Even if it was someone you love, there was probably that split second of mental scrambling, like being called on in class when you weren't prepared. Your brain suddenly had to shift from whatever it was focused on and immediately engage in this high stakes social performance. Because that's what phone calls are: live performances with no script, no pause button, and no delete key. Text messaging, on the other hand, gives your brain what it craves most: control and processing time. You can craft your response, edit it, consider the implications, and present the exact version of yourself you want to share. It's not about being fake, it's about being intentional. You're not broken for needing that buffer zone between thought and communication. But here's where it gets really interesting. This preference reveals something deeper about how your specific mind processes social connection. And understanding that difference might completely change how you see yourself in relationships. But there's another layer to this that most people don't realize. Your texting preference might actually be protecting you from what some psychologists call emotional flooding. When you're in a live conversation, emotions hit you in real time with full intensity. If someone sounds frustrated, disappointed, or even just slightly off, your nervous system picks up on those microsignals instantly, and your body starts responding before your rational mind can catch up. You know that feeling when someone's tone shifts during a call, and suddenly your chest tightens? That's your brain detecting a potential social threat and flooding your system with stress hormones. You're trying to have a normal conversation while your body is preparing for emotional danger. It's exhausting, and frankly, it makes sense that you'd want to avoid that entire experience. With texting, you get to process emotional information at your own pace. You can read that slightly terse message, notice your initial reaction, take a breath, and then choose how to respond rather than just react. You're not emotionally hijacked by someone else's mood or energy in real time. This isn't emotional avoidance, it's emotional regulation, and it's actually a sophisticated coping strategy. Some people naturally have more sensitive nervous systems that pick up on subtle social and emotional cues more intensely. If you're one of these people, phone calls can feel like drinking from a fire hose of social information. Your brain is working overtime to process not just the words, but every vocal inflection, pause, and background noise for potential meaning. What's fascinating is that this sensitivity that makes phone calls overwhelming is often the same trait that makes you incredibly intuitive and empathetic in other situations. Now, here's where your texting preference reveals something even more profound about your psychological makeup. You're likely what researchers call a high reflective processor. While some people think out loud and discover what they mean through talking, you think internally first and then communicate your conclusions. Phone calls essentially force you to think out loud, which feels like being asked to show your work before you've solved the math problem. This is why you might find yourself saying, a lot during calls, or feeling like you sound less intelligent than you actually are. You're being asked to verbalize thoughts that aren't fully formed yet, and that's genuinely uncomfortable for a reflective processor. It's like someone demanding to see a rough draft when you're used to only sharing the final version. What's really interesting is that this same trait that makes phone calls feel clunky often makes you an exceptional written communicator. You probably craft texts, emails, and messages that are clear, thoughtful, and precisely convey what you mean. People might even tell you that you're a great texter or that you always know exactly what to say in writing. That's not coincidence. You're playing to your cognitive strengths. The irony is that in a world that often values quick verbal responses and thinking on your feet, you might feel like your processing style is somehow inferior. But reflective processing is linked to deeper thinking, more nuanced understanding of complex issues, and often more meaningful communication when you do have time to formulate your thoughts. The problem isn't your preference, it's that you're trying to force your brain to operate in a mode that doesn't match how it naturally processes information. There's one more piece of this puzzle that might explain why phone calls feel so draining. You're probably experiencing what psychologists call synchrony pressure. During phone calls, you're forced to match someone else's conversational rhythm, energy level, and emotional state in real time. If they're talking fast, you feel rushed. If they're being overly enthusiastic when you're feeling mellow, you have to either fake matching their energy or deal with the awkwardness of the mismatch. This constant micro adjustment to someone else's communication style is mentally exhausting. You're essentially code switching your entire personality to fit the flow of the conversation, often without even realizing you're doing it. By the end of a long phone call, you might feel drained not because the conversation was difficult, but because you spent the entire time unconsciously adapting to someone else's communication patterns instead of operating from your natural baseline. With texting, you get to communicate from your authentic energy level. You can respond when you're feeling social, take breaks when you need to recharge, and engage at the pace that feels natural to you. You're not performing a version of yourself that matches someone else's tempo. You're just being yourself. This is why you might notice that you can text with someone for hours without feeling drained, but a 30-minute phone call with the same person leaves you needing recovery time. If you've ever felt guilty about this, here's what you need to know. Protecting your energy and communicating in ways that feel authentic isn't selfish. It's actually how you show up as your best self in relationships. But there's something even deeper happening here that connects to how you experience intimacy and connection with others. Here's something that might blow your mind. Your texting preference could actually indicate that you have a more sophisticated relationship with boundaries than most people. When you choose to text instead of taking that call, you're not being rude or avoidant. You're unconsciously protecting something psychologists call your psychological space, the mental and emotional room you need to show up authentically in interactions. Most people don't even realize they have psychological space, let alone that it needs protecting. But if you prefer texting, you're probably naturally aware that your mental state, energy level, and emotional capacity fluctuate throughout the day. A phone call at the wrong moment doesn't just interrupt what you're doing. It can completely derail your internal equilibrium. You instinctively know that answering when you're not mentally prepared often leads to conversations where you're not really present, which feels worse than not answering at all. This awareness of your own psychological needs is actually a sign of emotional intelligence, not social dysfunction. You recognize that quality connection requires you to have enough mental bandwidth to actually engage, rather than just go through the motions. When you text someone back instead of answering their call, you're often buying yourself the time and space to respond from a place of genuine availability, rather than obligation or panic. The guilt you might feel about this reveals something important. You've probably been taught that being available means being immediately accessible, regardless of your internal state. But healthy relationships actually thrive when both people communicate from a place of authentic readiness rather than forced compliance. Your texting preference might be protecting the quality of your connections in ways you haven't even considered. Subscribe for more psychology that actually makes sense, and watch this next video.